Burnout is on par with feature creep on the list of things that'll instantly kill a project, especially if you're contributing most of the work yourself. There's a lot of advice out there for overcoming burnout, and really it varies for everyone, but it's very important to discover what you can do to trick your brain. For me, I like to hyper-focus on the absolute least important features and fixes, which strangely has a cascading effect that leads me to actually work on important stuff later on. So I just came back from a nice week-long vacation, and the last thing I wanted to do after a 15-hour drive was sit in front of my computer, but I kept chanting all day, just draw a hand texture, Jay, and then you could play Steam Deck in bed all day. This 30-minute aside ended up turning into a multi-hour session. So during the 32-bit era, most games just couldn't afford detailed hands. The era was dominated by Lego claws and blocky fists. But hands are expressive, hand acting carries a lot of weight, and I have characters that smoke and perform various actions that I just wanted to add a little more detail to their oven mitts. I created a separate pointer finger, improved the overall silhouette, and painted a texture, which is where I slipped into meditation mode. I first painted a finger and copied it over a couple more times, then painted the palm with random lines. I could realign the UV for the fingers as well. Here lies the first hurdle. Palms have less melanin than the rest of the body, which means in a dark-skinned person there's a sharp transition. I had to paint textures for both the sides of the fingers and the transitory part from the palm to the wrist. Because I paint at a pretty low resolution, usually 256 square, I can get away with a dirty round brush and lots of blending. For skin tones, I go pretty wild with the gradient brush. I'll use some light noise to add a bit of interesting texture. Usually 1 to 2% noise is enough. Then I use a blur filter to soften the hard pixels. I also paint a texture for the sneakers. Up to this point, all my characters wear solid black loafers, basically, so it's fun to actually properly paint accessories. The end detail can get lost with my low-resolution camera, but for close-ups, the new texture is quite impressive. Up to this point, I never considered a limited palette. I downloaded a free tool called Color Quantizer, which crushes the palette, and it has lots of options for dithering, which a lot of devs had to do back in the day because they just had to be aware of avoiding ugly color banding. The PlayStation could do 256 square textures at 16 colors, but at best I can get away with 64 without having to repaint whole-ass textures. I'll probably settle for 64 colors for characters and 128 colors for the environment, but overall it just adds a bit of extra crunchiness without sacrificing visual fidelity. Next, I experiment with some ambient effects. I have a soft fluorescent hum I add to my bathroom scene. I'll make a proper video showing off my tools later, but I create a looping event that randomly cycles through a flickering light, as well as an electronic clicking sound as the light blinks on and off. I also create a spatial sound near the window of my exterior. It's got like an ambient audio of crickets chirping and a faint windy breeze. The sound grows louder the closer the camera is to the window. Which just 3D audio is the best. Like, if you're making a 3D game, you should use 3D audio. Lastly, I create a reverb override with the bathroom template, which changes audio to be very echoey and hollow, which adds a final bit of punch to the scene. And here is the fruits of my random labor. I really felt like taking the whole week off, but what began as just a few tweaks turned into several hours of work. To reiterate my original point, when I'm feeling burned out, I get motivated by hyper-focusing on small details. Development is an iterative process. You're kind of chipping away at a marble block. The fun parts of the process are the large sweeping changes, but it's difficult to see the big picture when you're tired, which is the perfect opportunity to chisel away at the finer detail you will probably ignore on a normal day. I mean, I sure as hell don't consider like a productive day just painting someone's fingernails.